Hello, everyone. We're thrilled to see so many of our friends and colleagues from across the country joining us for the conversation today. I'm Diana Suarez, and I lead our national partnerships work at the Flamboyant Foundation. I'm excited to get to kick us off today and to introduce our moderator in just a moment. Before we get going, I want to share a little bit about how you can engage with us during this webinar. So I'm going to share some information. First of all, be active. Engage in a conversation with us and with your fellow attendees using the chat box. Two of our Flamboyant staff members, Mike Andrews and Emily Van Houten, are here and excited to connect with you throughout the event. Links are going to be to where you work are also definitely encouraged. A quick note about the chat box, be sure you've set your chat to all panelists and attendees so that you can be part of the conversation with everybody here today. We encourage you to ask questions. Use the Q&A feature and submit your questions to all of our panelists and our attendees. We might answer them in writing, or we may use your question for the Q&A portion at the end of our webinar. Throughout the day, we encourage you to respond to our prompts. At a few points, we're going to ask you to respond to some polls on Slido, and we're going to get started with that in just a moment. So please be sure to participate there. Let's go ahead and kick off with our first question. You can use the QR code or just go to slido.com, as you see on the screen now. And we would love to hear what best describes your role. We want to get a sense of who is in the room with us and better curtail the conversation to you. So we have educators, many educators in the room, nonprofit leaders, wonderful, welcome. Advocates. Thank you, Emily, for that information. Yes, and lots of friends and colleagues from central offices across the country, but it looks like we're mostly educators. That's fantastic. Welcome to all of you. We're thrilled that you could join us today. All right. Now I want to turn to our conversation today. For those of you who are new to our work, Flamboyant Foundation is an organization that's co-headquartered in DC and in Puerto Rico. For more than a decade, we've worked to ensure all students have high-quality educational experiences. Our national work catalyzes and builds the capacity of change makers leading the charge for family engagement in communities across the country. We do this in a few ways, including through our national fellowship. And you're going to hear from 3 of our fellows today. At Flamboyant Foundation, we champion what we call real family engagement to ensure that families have what they need to support student success. Real family engagement happens when students and families have relationships with teachers that are built on trust, ongoing communication, and shared power. Experiences where educators have the opportunity to challenge their own biases and promote racial equity. Academic partnerships that include student performance and social emotional development, and leadership in schools and school systems and the communities where we all serve. We're looking for ways to create the conditions for meaningful engagement through real family engagement. A key pillar of how we work in real family engagement and in all of our initiatives is listening and learning from the communities in which we work. These last few months have underscored for us just how important it is not only to listen and to learn, but to keep those most impacted by inequity at the center of our work, particularly the Black and Brown members of our community who have been sidelined by centuries of systemic racism. We at Flamboyant have learned a lot over the last several months through our ongoing listening, and what we've heard is that people across the country want more opportunities to access the listening and learning that others have done. So that's why we're here today, to provide a space for listening to and sharing with those who matter most in every school community, students, families, and educators. We are thrilled to have several folks from across the country sharing with us today. First, we have Cheryl Ellsworth, who's the Community and Family Engagement Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education. Second, we have Dr. Liliana Valadez, who serves as the Executive Director of Parent Advocacy and Support Services for Dallas Independent School District. And finally, we have Dr. Bobby White, who's the founder and CEO of Fraser Community Schools in Memphis, Tennessee. I'll note that all three of these panelists are members of the second cohort of our National Family Engagement Fellowship and very dear friends to all of us at Flamboyant. We just culminated that second cohort in 2019, and we encourage you to be on the lookout for our official announcement about our cohort 3 fellows, which is coming very soon. So with all of that said, I'm going to hand the mic over to today's moderator, Shanita Burney. Shanita serves as the Communication and Engagement Officer at the District of Columbia Public Schools. The Office of Communications and Engagement supports parents and families in developing strong home and school relationships. It fosters business and community partnerships and spearheads all stakeholder engagement efforts. Shanita is a longtime friend of Flamboyant, and we've come a long way together. She's been deeply involved in our family and community engagement work for several years, and she brings an important perspective to our conversation right now as someone leading communications and engagement efforts for a school district. Welcome, Shanita.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks, Diana, and the Flamboyant team. She's absolutely right. We have grown in this work together like play cousins and have been together since we were wee toddlers. It's just amazing to look back and see how much we have grown doing this work together. So thrilled to be here with Flamboyant and all of their partners across the country. I'm excited to be here to be a part of this important conversation today. As Diana mentioned, I'm the Communications and Engagement Officer at DC Public Schools. This office for our district oversees the district's family and community engagement work, in addition to the district level and crisis communications and press and media. And I've worked for DCPS for 11 years. I'm a resident here. I have a high school age daughter in a DCPS school. And at DCPS, we believe that families are our strongest partners. As many of you, I would go so far as to say all of you do believe. And as we navigate these unique challenges of school year 2021 together, this partnership is more important than ever. As I think about the partnership that we've had with Flamboyant, you know, when I describe the work of our office, I often start with the family engagement work, because that is such a hallmark of the work that we do in DCPS in this office. We often speak to how it is anchored in this partnership with Flamboyant Foundation. We launched back in 2012 with 4 partner schools. We've grown to over 30 this year, and includes elementary, middle school, and high school. When we think about the way that we work with Flamboyant, I get this question from time to time because we have a rather unique relationship with them, again, since we really started in this work together and we're in the same city. Flamboyant has historically piloted, funded, and supported innovation around our engagement work in the district. And worked in coordination with our senior leaders, our chancellor, our city leaders, around codifying this into programs, building our DCPS capacity, and ultimately, as any good funder is supposed to do, building our capacity as a district to take this work on to the next level. And so ultimately thinking about the role that we have played in this partnership and we continue to play, we sustain the work with funding from our district, with resources, with systems, with thought leadership. And so really thrilled that as we reflect back on over the years, we started out in school year 11-12 with less than 1,000 home visits. And this past school year, 19-20, up until March, when of course the pandemic hit, we had about as many home visits as we had had the year before, a little over 11,000. And so I feel good in knowing that we were probably on track to meet and exceed that goal and potentially make an all new record in terms of how many home visits we're doing. So I'll just take a couple of more minutes just to share briefly, and then we'll get to the panelists, how DCPS is supporting families through this pandemic. All of us have had to make some major shifts in terms of how we do engagement with families, given this virtual setting. And while there have been many trade-offs, there have been some really exciting and great moments that we've been able to have, such as a virtual parent university series that we launched. Because of the work that DCPS did to ensure that our families had more access to computer devices, access to high-speed internet, we have just found an incredible amount of reach that we've been making that was just unimaginable. And these parent university topics have ranged, but one of our most popular ones is as we begin to think about virtual learning, our virtual learning posture, and even as we plan to and think about what it looks like to come back in person, having this specific strand around in the parent university for families around mental health, supports for specialized populations, using this as an opportunity to answer questions around what this is looking like or supports has been really, really key. And we've gotten lots of good feedback around that. As well, we created a family guide. There was so much information that we were putting out there as a district in terms of what learning at home looked like. And so we wanted to make sure that that information was going in family-friendly ways that were accessible. And so really worked a lot on how to make sure they were getting key information on virtual instruction, schedules, technology, family wellness. Key part of our work, of course, is how we support educators. That's a key component of our work with the home visit work and academic partnering. And so we had to shift the professional development work and the way that we support and coach schools around home visits. Knowing we made a decision as a district in coordination with Flamboyant that we weren't going to continue with home visits in light of the pandemic, but that we were going to build out what virtual relationship building looked like. And so we've been able to develop materials and training and resources and supporting our educators around there. And then lastly, I'll just speak to the Family Engagement Collaborative. This was professional development cohort of teachers from around teachers and educators from around our district that come together periodically in this professional learning community to, ensure that they are learning and sharing these family engagement strategies like relationship building, ongoing communications, and partnering with families on academic. This is the 8th year of the program, and we specifically focused on what this looks like virtually. And I've been really pleased with that. So that just shares a little bit, a snapshot of some of the work that we've prioritized and how we are moving through, our existence right now, our pandemic existence. And so happy to share a little bit there with you. Now I'm going to get to the part that I know we're all waiting for, and that is the conversation with the panelists. But before we bring them on, I want to quickly remind you of the 3 ways that you can engage with us today, and it's on the screen. Remember when you're using the chat box, be sure to have it set to all panelists and attendees. We have Flamboyant team members that are excited on the back end working to make sure that they're able to answer your questions in the chat today. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Emily. While our first panelist joins us on screen, we have 2 quick poll questions for you to respond to on Slido. I love Slido. If you're not using this in your district, take a look at it. There's a free version. We ended up paying for this, but it really helps to do some real-time polling when you're in public meetings. So please follow the prompt on the screen and go ahead and do that now. What is your district or CMO's current operating status? And then I'll say the second question in just a second. Great, I see the majority of folks are saying entirely virtual. That's where DCPS is right now. Do see some folks that are putting in opt-in or a combination of in-person and virtual, and then where everyone is hybrid. Everyone is in part virtual and in part in person. Interesting to see that there's probably, I guess, with the 5%, maybe 1, maybe 2 that are entirely in person. So it's interesting. All right, so the second question that we'll do quickly is your district or CMO's operating status set to change in the next 3 months? We know that many of us are working to make sure we're being responsive to the health and safety needs of our school communities, our staff, our students, our families, but also recognizing that we are juggling the decision, our cities are juggling the decision to bring back our students who are, quite frankly, furthest from opportunity. And, you know, virtual learning might not be working for them. So it looks like the majority of folks that are here, operating status is changing in the next 3 months. I think that reflects largely what I'm seeing as well in the area that, in the DMV area that I'm in, but as well around the country. We know that the best place for kids to learn is in school, and I know that many of us are interested in getting them back in with us. All right, now that you've had a chance to share a little bit more about yourselves, I wanna dive into listening by welcoming our first panelist, Cheryl Ellsworth, who is a family and community engagement specialist at the Utah State Board of Education, but I will say by way of DC and DCPS, shout out there. So welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you so much. I also have to say that I started my career in Prince George's County. So I'm a former PG and DC public schools teacher.
That's right. That's right. Repping for the DMV. I'm good with that. Excellent. So it's been quite a year for folks in education. It's been quite a year for all of us. But as we think about those of us in education, I'd like to start by checking in and just ask you, you know, how are you doing?
Yes, it has been quite a year, and I'll be very transparent with you. I'm a blue voter that lives in a very red state, not even a purple state. I'm in a red state. So that has been very eye-opening for me, and what that means for me and the things that I want as a newer mother. I have an 18-month-old. And so I think about raising a Black son in America today every single moment. And I feel bad. Like sometimes I have these conversations with him and he's just like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I just want to protect you and keep you safe. So there's a lot on my mind. The work of family and community engagement has definitely gone to another level for me becoming a mother.
Yeah, it becomes much more personal.
Mm-hmm.
It's personal anyway. This work is very personal, no matter if you have kids or not. But when you do have a kid, yeah, it takes it to a whole other level. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to ask you, in Utah, each LEA determined their reopening status. Mm-hmm. It boggles my mind to even think about what that looks like. Just working within our small District of Columbia. And really being responsible for sort of the overall DC public schools. But so thinking about your status there, from your perspective, how has equity for Utah families showed up in reopening decisions?
You know, I've actually been pretty impressed with the decisions of the LEAs because truly, looking at our state, there have been areas that were never hit with COVID. I mean, always in the green. And so for families in those really small areas where schools had maybe 30 kids, they shut down for like a week last school year, but they're going all the time. But then you have places like Salt Lake City, whose numbers were very high. And on the east side of Salt Lake, that's generally where the parents who have a little bit more say in how things are run, they actually listened to the west side parents who said, listen, we're your essential workers. We're the reason that things are still running, and we don't want our kids to be exposed to COVID. We don't want to open up. So it was really great to hear that there were families' voices that were actually listened to, and their impact was made. And so I've seen a hybrid of reopening. We have some that are completely virtual, some that go 4 days a week with Fridays off for cleaning. We have some schools that have half virtual, half in person. So I've seen it all.
Yeah, yeah. I know we in DC, and I know you all are thinking about this in Utah, just the equity gaps that are associated with being all virtual versus hybrid versus in-person, and ensuring that no matter what area of the city, what area of the state that you're in, that everyone is getting the best option for their students and kids. And so I know that that's hard to manage. And I know that you all have done some really great work yourself, leading some really great work to make sure that that's in place there. So you shared with us previously that you've been receiving in-reach from schools and teachers you don't normally hear from. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you think that is, and what are they saying?
Yes, I think especially this is really coming from our rural communities. And I think there's this perception that rural communities, everyone knows each other because they're small. But in our rural communities, we have a very large migrant population. And I think what's happening is we have teachers and administrators who are not connecting with families of color who are migrant families, and they want to. They want to understand how to connect with communities that may not be the dominant race or demographic of the teachers. And so we're actually trying to do some more work to help our rural areas that have a larger population, or even if it's a tiny population of students of color.
Yeah. How has your work with educators overall shifted since COVID?
Yeah, I think that part's it's been really interesting. It's been twofold. First, because I am a state worker, on any given day, I could drive 3 hours away and still come back the same day for like one meeting, right? So it's been really nice to do a lot more outreach virtually without the exhaustion of driving, honestly, to just really say like, I can meet with people up north, people down south, all in one day versus like, and this week I meet with people in the north, and this week I meet with people in the south. So I feel like the reach that I want has been great.
Yeah.
But it is shallow. I feel like I want to go deeper. I want to know these teachers better. I want to know the communities better. So it's like I'm here everywhere, but not very deeply.
Yeah, I definitely understand that dynamic. I appreciate your reflections, appreciate your work, and thank you so much for sharing with us today, Cheryl. We'll see you back here in just a few minutes.
Thank you, Shanita.
Next, I'd like to introduce and welcome our second panelist, Dr. Liliana Valadez, who serves as the Executive Director of Parent Advocacy and Support Services for Dallas Independent School District. Welcome, Liliana.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Liliana, I'm going to start with the question, the same question that I asked Cheryl. How are you? How are you doing?
Well, also going to be transparent, better now than I was. So, you know, when we closed down in my work, I actually was out there handing out gift cards to families, driving around in a district van, delivering gift cards to families we know we really needed it with our masks, hanging bags with the gift cards on doors, walking away so we wouldn't expose ourselves. And so I don't know how I got it, but I definitely got COVID. I was at home sick in bed for 8 days, spent 10 days on remdesivir in the hospital, and it was a close call, but I'm here to continue that work. And I think that's why I'm here. So personally, I'm doing much better. No one else in my family, not even my husband, got it. So that's a good thing. Professionally, I think we're still all in the work, trying to figure out the best things we can do for our families and continuing that work. So much better now than I was, and just trying to cope with everything going on and grandkids in school and not being able to see a mother, you know, in a facility, but continuing the work that we need to do to help our families.
Yeah, well, let me just say on behalf of everyone on this call, that we're so happy to hear that you're doing better and appreciate the commitment to service to your students and families and community, that you sacrificed yourself there, and really happy that it didn't impact your family as well. Know that there's so many stories out there of heroes just like you continuing this work and how they were impacted by COVID as a result of that. So anyway, just glad to hear that you're doing better. Would love to ask you a question. In Dallas Independent School District, families have the choice of whether or not they want to send their kids to in-person school. And you shared with us before that the district is about to go half and half right now. So talk to us a little bit about how this hybrid reality has impacted how do you conduct family and community engagement.
So we were actually 100% virtual for the first few weeks, and we are now, as of October, the end of October, they have a choice. So families have a choice. About half of them chose to go in on campus, and then half of them chose to stay at home virtually. And so that poses a bunch of opportunities, but a bunch of challenges, right? So we're not just 100% virtual, having to, figure out how to stay connected with our families and get connected. Or, the other way around, we're doing both, right? So we are having to pivot implementation and do both, reaching out to families and making sure that we cover them in a variety of ways. For example, with some districts 100% virtual, they don't have the transportation issues, right? But we have transportation issues in addition to making sure everybody has devices and hotspots. So we have both going on. So definitely a challenge, but I'm proud of the district and pivoting because we have quickly made changes. Shanita, you mentioned the home visits, and we're doing those as well. So in that challenge of having to go virtual, it's brought an opportunity that teachers, since you only need one on a visit instead of two, we quadruple the number of visits that each teacher is planning for this year. So that's brought some opportunity to us. Also in our communication strategies, our parents really quickly learned how to do Zoom, get our Facebook Live, how to, listen to podcasts, and, we've had to keep our and our web pages current. So a lot of things for us, and actually maximizing emails, which we now have, before we only had 40% of emails with our families. They want to be connected. They want the information, right? So our principals are saying we've got even more relationship building to do and connectivity, text messaging, sending communications home. For our virtual students, they come through most of them come through a line to pick up meals. So we're able to put in flyers and information in their meal packets. So just trying to maximize a lot of ways and connecting with our families during this time.
Yeah, I often say, in this family engagement work, technology and reaching out to our folks, our families, that's often, we've seen that as a barrier. But the opportunities that have been presented that have allowed us to expand our reach is just remarkable. This might be an overreach, but I often feel like, my goodness, we are closing the technology gap. Mm-hmm. in a number of months. And so thinking about what you referenced before about having the meal service sites and making sure that folks are getting technology and access to internet connections. From your perspective, what systems needed to be in place for districts to hear and respond to families, and what's working for you in Dallas?
So for sure, we all need to have systems for getting the intentional family voice, right? I think it's got to be even more intentional now. So what are those avenues we're getting the feedback from? So people would tend to think that these webinars, may be one-sided, but we got to capture their feedback. So at the beginning of the school year, we had a 2-week, 6-day in the evening virtual parent conference, right? On a variety of topics, from safety protocols to special ed to transportation to, just a lot of topics. So in each one of those, we captured surveys from the parents, we captured feedback, took that and helped us pivot on our plans and what we need to change based on that family voice. So we all have to have systems to capture that. We all have to have systems to connect to the families. So more importantly now is not just the work that we do, but the work that our external partners do. So how do we connect families to those resources they need, like rent assistance, like food pantries? We only give out meals once a week. and that only lasts so long, especially if you have big families that maybe not in the school system. So how do you need to supplement that? So we need to figure out how we get those families those resources they need. And then lastly, what we figured out too, we're a big district, right? We have 146,000 students. And how do our different departments, which, early learning has family engagement, our special ed has family engagement, and all these departments have family engagement. We got to connect internally, right? So we got to collaborate so we're not duplicating efforts there. And so each one of them know what we're doing. So what the other hand's doing in a district our size. So those are systems, I think all three of those that are really important during this time.
Absolutely, and co-sign on everything you just said. This is great. Hopefully folks on the call are furiously writing notes down. I think this is just some really great information and insight that you and Cheryl were sharing before. It's been a pleasure, Dr. Valadez, speaking with you. We'll see you again shortly, and want to remind folks that we'll do some Q&A at the end. And so any Q&A that you have, any questions that you have for the panelists, please be placing those in the chat box. We'll be lifting up questions from there for me to pose to each of the panelists. So make sure you're doing that. So last but not least, I'd love to introduce and invite Dr. Bobby White to join me. Dr. White is the founder and CEO of Freyer Community Schools in Memphis, Tennessee. Welcome, Dr. White. I think you might need to unmute yourself. So,
I have. Yep.
That's the most overused statement.
Yep. Everybody has a t-shirt, needs a t-shirt that says
That's
that.
right. That's right. You probably know by now what my first question is going to be, right?
I do. I was hoping that you asked me that question because normally when folks ask me that, I don't think they really want my real answer because I'm going to keep them for a minute when I give them my answer. So, but I think I always just say that I'm doing extremely well anytime I'm on this side of the dirt and have the opportunity to be better than I was the day before, to be able to offer a kind gesture to somebody, an act of kindness to somebody, and just impact the lives of the students and families that we serve. It's what we do, right? And so anytime I'm able to do that, I always can say that I'm doing in spite of. Like everyone, I have dealt with a number of challenges as it relates to the pandemic, specifically being an introvert, even though I'm an introvert, right? I have really struggled with the isolation of it all. And I'm one of those introverts that live in the world with the work. And so I need the work to fill me up. And with that, able to actually put my hands on students and families and community and being able to smile and or get a hug, it has been it's been personally challenging for me. In addition to that, the unrest in our country, the social unrest, many of the challenges that have been faced across the country with a lot of the racial rhetoric that is going on has really been challenging. And the reason why that's been extremely challenging is not being able to be in front of our students who many times need us to guide them, and they want to bounce questions and ideas off of us about what is going on in the moment. They haven't really had that opportunity to do that. And so my heart aches for them and us not being able to be there for them. But in spite of all of that, I am extremely encouraged by the times that we're in. I think that as educators, grassroots leaders, we often talk about that the way to change things is to dismantle the system, right? Well, COVID has brought the system to its knees. And given that COVID has brought the system to its knees, we have an opportunity to take the things that we're doing now to develop best practices to end up in a situation where we're better off than before COVID started to impact us.
That's right.
Looking at this as a an opportunity as opposed to playing victim Olympics, woe is me, and all of the challenges that we're facing, right? And just really saying, shame on us if we're not better on the other side of this. If we're not better on the other side of this and take this as an opportunity, then likely we're comfortable with our public school system being warehouses for cheap labor and prisoners. And we really don't care about equity, right? So I'm encouraged and excited about where we are, given the circumstances that we are in today.
Thank you for that. That spoke to my spirit. I'm glad this is being recorded because there were some sound bites that you said that I'm like, oh, I need to use that. That was, I'm sure you spoke to many folks on the call, Spirit. So thanks for that. So I know that Freyer Community Schools are currently operating in a virtual environment. So how did you all make that transition, and what has the response been like from students and families?
So back in March 12th to be exact, one day before spring break, one day before the beginning of the fourth after spring break. So one day before third quarter ends. My organization had already looked into and trained our teachers on Canvas, a platform where teachers are able to upload their lessons and assignments, and students can have able to learn asynchronously, right? And so when this happened then, which was last school year, we took that opportunity to really kind of get our cadence up of what this was going to look like. The anticipation for me was that we probably weren't going to start school in person. And so we took that opportunity to engage parents, help them to understand what we wanted to do, and just to say, learning is going to continue. We cannot allow this to widen the, if you will. And so I guess we got practice. We got a lot of practice from March to the end of May.
That's right.
What was the challenge was, of course, everybody didn't have technology, right? We had been working as an organization over the last 2 or 3 years to move towards a one-to-one model. We were close, but probably another 300-400 devices. When this pandemic hit and we recognized the CARES Act dollars were going to flow to us, we immediately bought those devices, moved to a one-to-one model, reached out to the internet providers to see if we could get access to families' homes and or hotspots. We're able to pull that off. And so we were able to, when the school in August, have every student equipped with a device, equipped with access, ready to learn. Our families were excited because, they were happy that their babies had a device and that they were going to have school, and that it mattered to us. As I always say, the school is the center of the community, and our families understood that.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. How has your team kept relationships at the center while staying physically distant?
Wow. So that was challenging. I think earlier on in your question about how I'm doing, there is a disconnect. However, one of the things that we immediately did, and this was back in April and May of last year, was we implemented a system of wellness checks, whereby our non-instructional staff, we're intentional about how you execute these things. Our non-instructional staff who were not online and virtual instructing students had a list of parents and families that they reached out to on a daily, weekly basis with a series of questions to determine or to see what needs our families had. Based on us and the partnerships that we have and all of the folks that are committed to the work that we do and the families that we serve, then once we understood what families were needing, we were able to get those families those resources so that they would be able to really, really survive and this unique challenge that we were being faced with. That was something that became a part of just what we did. In addition, into that, toward the end of last school year, I have a high school, and so there is graduation, right? And
Mhm.
everyone around the country was wondering, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, we decided to do a Happy Trails graduation drive-through, whereby we, a duffel bag with the school logo on it, with a book, a mask, of course, and just some keepsakes for our students. No one had real good, like all the restaurants were closed, so I had one of the wing shops from around in the city bring the wing truck up, and every student's family was able to get a box of food as they drove through. And I just thought it was so inspiring to me because it was unlimited. So each family, as many cars as they wanted, and get out of the cars. And so they drove by, the student was able to get out a duffel bag, take a distance picture with the principal. Their families were able to honk their horns, blow, and everybody was just so excited, right? So it was, again, this idea that if you care about families and you know what they need and you're connected to them, then you do it whatever you have to do in order to ensure that they know you care. Yeah. Graduation in our communities many times is the greatest, or one of the greatest moments that will ever happen. For us not to be able to have one in person was going to break my heart. And so I just would say, look, we were recognized in the local media. I think that many of the other schools in our state copied our model, and we just were really excited to be able to do what we needed to do for our families. Finally, since that time, we continue to do our wellness checks, and our families, we're connected to our families with doing food drives. We have a partner, Whole Child Strategies, who has supported us with a number of initiatives and provide cards and so on to our families. And so we are staying connected as best in spite of the space that is there.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you've taken lemons and made lemonades. The idea of the graduation, the class of 2020 graduation will go down in history. And, in terms of how everybody tried to make it meaningful for their students and families.
We never played victim Olympics. In America, when America has the cold, Black America has the flu. So we're used to being able to, in the moment, on the fly, make decisions and create things that are going to be good for the betterment of our families and our communities. And we take pride in that, and then we embrace it and embrace that leadership.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. White. That was really great. I'm going to ask you to stay on camera, and I'm going to invite all of our other panelists to come back on screen so that we can take a few questions from the chat box. So just thank you again, as the panelists are coming back on screen. Thank you again for sharing such candid thoughts and reflections today. I'd like to kick off this conversation by asking you, what do you think are and I've heard many of them through each of your sharing today. What do you think are the bright spots and the challenges right now in your district or state? And so why don't we start with Cheryl?
Okay, yep, I'll go ahead and start. So I think a bright spot is that family engagement, at least in my workspace, is no longer a last thought or a second thought. I'm getting messages from teaching and learning, CTE. I'm getting messages from all different departments being like, okay, how do we incorporate family engagement in this? Whereas before I was really an afterthought, and they're like, how long have you been doing this? And that's been hard. In Title I, we've always been great. In special education, we have a space, but I feel like it's definitely a first thought versus an afterthought. But I will say what's been really challenging is I have really seen the the layers that a pandemic brings on our most marginalized communities, right? So I already felt like, hey, with the privileges I have as a person, it is my duty and my job to advocate for the most marginalized groups of people. There are things that I've experienced in my life, but there are things that I haven't experienced in my life. And it's with the privileges that I do have, it's my responsibility to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves. But the pandemic has brought on a whole new layer of marginalization that I don't even think I was prepared for. And I'm like, what do we really do to reach those families that are just like, it feels like such a stretch. And I've learned a lot about meeting people where they are.
Yeah, yeah. It's been so interesting to have this new peek into our families' homes through the virtual learning and the cameras that are on with our students. And there have been things, I know we have all in family engagement and doing this work with kids seen some shocking things, but it opened up this whole new window. And so thinking about how this is allowing us to think about the supports that they need in a new and better way is really spot on.
Definitely. It's like a whole new level of empathy that that I've seen from the few teacher friends that have allowed me to see, like, you know, what it looks like in the day. It's been a while since I've been in the classroom, but I mean, seeing the gap widen right in front of my eyes is very alarming. And that piece is hard to swallow.
Dr. Valadez, I'd love to hear you respond to that question again. What do you think are the bright spots and challenges right now in your district or state, or if you want to respond to anything that Cheryl just spoke to?
Yeah, I think one of the bright spots for us is that, you know, in the spring, we were fortunate to have 1 day notice that we were all shutting down. A lot of districts had already shut down for spring break and they didn't have that opportunity. We had 1 day to make sure everyone, as many as we could, give out devices, that we had a plan. We could send home packets for people that didn't have devices. So that 1 day really forced us to get on the ball and do that. So having a variety of all these learning systems that teachers were using, again, in a district our size, they were using this and that and Google Classroom and Seesaw. So this, over the summer, we revamped and it gave us an opportunity to narrow that focus, and where we're using 10 learning management systems, we're only using a few. So that's a bright spot, because parents are really on the academic side, they really want to be involved in the academic things, right? So what are my kids needing to learn? What are they struggling with? So the academic focus for those parents has really increased tremendously. On the other hand, a challenging spot for us right now would be we're in a second wave. And with that, we have a protocol that's given to us from the county that says, if you have this kind of symptom that could be possibly COVID, you're going home. So and connecting back to Cheryl, if you're in that marginalized student population, and now we're sending you home again because you have a runny nose and have allergies, and you don't have COVID, and we're sending them home all over again, where they really wouldn't need to be in school and their parents are working. That's the challenge right now, is sending kids home when they really don't want to and don't have the, parents are working, and having to send them home because they have something different that has the similar symptoms. Certainly a challenge for us.
Yeah, there's a whole other level of mental health supports, trauma that our families are experiencing, that all of us are experiencing, and that we've never experienced in this way before, that makes us think differently about what types of supports we're going to provide. Dr. White, would love for you just to answer that same question. I'll repeat it. What do you think are the bright spots and challenges right now in your district or state? And I'm going to throw in there, I'm going to take moderator's prerogative for a second. As we think about, and what Dr. Valadez said made me think about this, the way that we think about family engagement, it's anchored, and certainly that Flamboyant has led our country into understanding, is that we engage families as partners in their students' academic achievement and success. That without them partnering, their students won't progress as far as they could. But in the way that they have had to show up now virtually, in terms of supporting their students, supporting their kids in the homes academically has really, really challenged many of our families. And so would love to hear if in some of your bright spots or challenges, if you all have experienced that and identified any new innovative ways, how you're supporting families' ability to support their kids academically in much more deep, in more depth and intense ways. And I think he was having some internet connectivity issues. And so while we're getting him back, I don't know if Dr. Valadez, if you have, or Cheryl, if you have any feedback or insight on what your school districts are doing or how they're addressing that.
You know, just thinking of all the avenues we can help support our families, again, on the academic side, we're knowing that there are challenges out there, right? There are kids that are in daycare during the day and their grandparent is taking care of them and they can't log on. The grandparents don't understand technology, the daycare workers won't connect them on. So we got to figure out how else can they engage with us. And so we do. If they can't join our Zoom calls during the day, we have an opportunity for them to do the activities for elementary school with my granddaughters, getting on Seesaw and doing all those academic things in Seesaw and showing they're engaged with families. And the teacher has to go back on and see, did they do some activities? Okay, they were present, they weren't absent because they were engaged not during the day, but in the evening. So we go back and correct that or change that absence. So again, just ensuring that we're giving lots of avenues and entry spots for families to be involved in the academic side. Because if they can't log on during the day, that doesn't mean they're not doing something at home and parents get home in the evening. So just having to think about those opportunities, think those through for families.
Well, while Dr. White is back, sorry, Cheryl, I don't mean to cut you off. I wanted to give him a chance to take 60 or 90 seconds to respond to that question.
Yeah. So y'all can hear me now. I don't have any idea what's going on. But first and foremost, I want to make sure we recognize the family engagement. And if it was stronger before now, some of the challenges that we're facing, we wouldn't be facing rather. I think that, and we've talked about this before, I think that family engagement and true connectivity to parents and families is the secret sauce to catapulting academic achievement to that next stratosphere. Because if the families if they trusted us already, then what's going on now, a lot of the challenges we're facing, they just wouldn't be there, right? And so I guess to respond to your question, some bright spots are just that we're finding that many of our babies are thriving in this environment.
This is true.
There we have a story of a young man, a seventh grader, who was in trouble every day. Now in this environment, he's uploading examples of how to access information and is helping to lead tutorial sessions with his peers. There's no way on the backside of this, if we force him back into the school where we know that's not his least restrictive environment, and we know that's not where he thrives, then shame on us. So I'm just going to say, like, that's a bright spot. You gave me 90 seconds. I'll stop there. But there are so many bright spots that we got to pay attention to them and make sure that this looks so much different on the backside of it.
Yes, I got some goosebumps off of that one. Yes. Okay, Cheryl, close us out.
No, I was just going to say that I've been actually really impressed by the families that seemingly have it all together, recognizing like how much they don't when their kid has to be at home all day and they're trying to work and they have all the resources to make things work, and they recognize like, well, actually, this is very hard for me. So what is it like for a family that doesn't have as many resources? So when I talk about family and community engagement, I have seen literal communities of people who do not have to engage with families that are not like them, with families that do not have resources and are saying, If I'm struggling with all the resources I have, what's
Mhm.
going on down the street and what
That's
can
right.
I do? And
That's
I've
right.
just been really impressed that people like parents, like people who might be CEOs of these companies that have, it has nothing to do with their job. They're like, what can we do to check up on families to make sure that their needs are being met? I know you have connections. So what can I do with the resources I have to make sure that people who don't have as much are at least starting off at the same, as much of the same playing field as I am. So I love how the community is actually stepping up and doing their part on their own. Because I think, again, another level of empathy has been created.
This has been a powerful conversation today, panelists. I'm so inspired by each of you and the work that you're doing in your school districts. I'm humbled by the work that you do for students, families, and communities every day. And I'm proud to call myself or to be among you.
Thank you.
I'd like to pass the mic back to Diana to close us out.
Thanks so much, Shanita, and thanks to all of our panelists. You stole my thunder because I was thinking myself just how humbled I am to work with these excellent family engagement practitioners and leaders. We do have one last poll for each of you on Slido. We'd love to close out just by asking everyone to share how you are feeling at the end of this time together. So I'm going to ask everybody to quickly take that poll. Okay. And we recognize that this moment is challenging. It's challenging for all of us and also does offer us an opportunity to make school work for all students and families. I love this word cloud. We are inspired. We are encouraged. This is so excellent. So thank you all. We want to send you away with a few tools and resources. I know people have to hop to their 4 p.m. meetings. We get that. So you'll see a bit.ly link coming up in the chat and on screen. You can also find us on Twitter. You can find us at Flamboyant FDN. Be sure to look out for our follow-up emails as well as future webinar opportunities with us. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, and major thanks to Cheryl Ellsworth, Dr. Liliana Valadez, Dr. Bobby White, and our amazing moderator, Shanita Burney. This concludes our time together. So have a wonderful day, and thank you all.